The Shimshock Show. Today I'm interviewing conservative firebrand, hair connoisseur, and #1 threat to special snowflakes across the nation, Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo, how are you?
Thank you so much. As always, I'm so happy when people appreciate the work, the effort that goes into making it this perfect. Thank you.
Now, full disclaimer, I used to work under Milo at Breitbart.
Not actually under me, but yes, you were on the
this
scene.
is true.
You were on the scene. You were my favorite intern.
Thank you very much. So Milo, I guess we'll start off from the top, current events. So after his last tour quite literally went up in flames when anti-fascists rioted, smashed ATMs, and started a fire at UC Berkeley, Milo will now be embarking on a new tour this year. Milo, could you tell us a little about Troll Academy?
Sure. So my last tour was a spectacular success by all accounts and on all metrics. With the exception of the fact that the last couple of dates I wasn't actually able to perform because Antifa, the most fascist anti-fascist organization, the most fascist organization in America, showed up, smashed the place up, assaulted people, and shut the talk down. Now, something that people don't always remember or perhaps consider about me is that I don't have any particularly outrageous opinions. Now, I am a provocateur. I like to tell jokes, I like to express myself forcefully and humorously, and I like to provoke, and I like to upset, and I like to entertain. But my opinions, the things that I believe, and the things that I say on stage are well within the reasonable mainstream of conservative political discourse. And they dislike me because I'm really effective. But what I actually say isn't particularly unusual. They just don't like me because I have so much of a bigger audience than anyone else they've seen before. So, these guys come up, they try and smash the place up. We're not going to allow that to deter us. We're not going to allow that to happen a second time. The previous tour budget was $2 million. We're increasing the amount of money that we're spending. We're increasing our resources. We're doing more dates. We're coming back and Troll Academy. If the previous tour was sort of introducing Milo to America, I'm this guy who's going to smash down your safe spaces, prove identity politics wrong, and demonstrate to you why political correctness is a load of old codswallop. The new tour is me teaching other people how to be like me. So my book Dangerous comes out on July 4th this year, of course, and Troll Academy is kind of where the book leaves off. Troll Academy begins, and it is my lecture series, if you like, to America, not just college students, but everyone everywhere, how to be dangerous, how to smash safe spaces, how to wind up progressives, how to beat feelings and offense, the feelings and offense brigade with facts, reason, logic, and argument. And I'm going to be teaching people how to do it in a fun and entertaining and mischievous and probably very offensive way, all across the country from this September. Now, the tour starts in September with Free Speech Week in Berkeley. We're going back to Berkeley. We're not going to allow them to shut us down. We are going to stage a week-long free speech festival in UC Berkeley, supposedly home of the free speech movement. We're going to have a bunch of different speakers. Each day will be dedicated to one of the major threats to free expression, whether it's Islam, feminism, Black Lives Matter, or UC Berkeley itself. I have a bunch of great speakers. Every evening there'll be a big marquee speech, culminating on Friday with my speech, and the inaugural Mario Savio Award for Free Speech, which I'm hoping to give to Ann Coulter, because she too was prevented from speaking at Berkeley by these fascists and by their accomplices, whether in senior ranks in law enforcement, university officials, or local elected representatives like the mayor of Berkeley, who seems by all accounts to be utterly, and completely embroiled in these crazy far-left politics that take hold in various cities in California. So we're back, bigger and better than ever, and the tour's going to be spectacular. And it's going to be, if you enjoy seeing reason, truth, logic, mischief triumph over hurt feelings and manufactured outrage, then you're going to enjoy a lot of what comes out of this tour.
Great. So with regard to Dangerous, which you mentioned comes out on July 4th, the book is so dangerous, and perhaps you are, in fact, that Simon & Schuster dropped it. So Milo will instead be self-publishing the book through Dangerous Books, which, as I understand, is a new publishing wing of his company. So Milo, on Amazon, you call Dangerous the most controversial book of the decade. Why is that?
Well, I think because it's kind of like the Bible from perhaps the most dangerous conservative of his generation. It's remarkable to me that somebody, as I said earlier, who has perfectly respectable mainstream, reasonable opinions, but who has a massive fan base and is therefore dangerous to the left. gets the sort of ire and attention from the left that I do. I guess it's just because I'm so good at my job, which I take as a compliment. But the book, as you say, well, self-published is underselling it a little bit. What I've actually done is I've put $3 million into a new publishing imprint, and our intention is to cannibalize the other conservative imprints at major publishers, take all of their best authors from them, and provide somewhere where people who don't fit into mainstream publishing, whether or not they're strictly speaking conservative or libertarian, because my arms are open to people who, from all walks of life, bits of the political spectrum, no matter what they look like, if they're good enough, who don't fit into the traditional mold of publishing, for whatever reason are having a difficult time getting published by someone like Simon & Schuster. We are going to give them a platform. We're going to provide them with beautifully produced books that are the equal or the superior of anything they could get from a mainstream publisher. We're going to provide them with marketing clout. We're going to provide them with more money than they would have got from a mainstream publisher. And we're going to provide them, most importantly, with a platform where they can say, do, and be anything and advocate any point of view they like. Obviously, we will decide who we want to publish and who we don't. That's up to us. We'll have some views on the kinds of people that we decide to invest in and the ones that we don't. But for those authors that we choose, those authors that we wish to publish, we're going to give them, we'll give them all of the tools that you get with a traditional publisher, and proofreaders and production, all the rest of it. But what we won't be doing, which traditional publishers do to conservative authors all the time, is seeking to dampen down the humor, censor the opinions, round off the edges, if you like, so as not to offend people. We're very happy to offend people if it is justified, if the subject matter commands it, or if it's just fun.
Right, so now this whole concept of offense taking brings me to another topic I wanted to discuss with you. And so I think it's safe to say that you and I both detest outrage culture. This idea that people should lose their livelihood over innocent jokes or statements ripped out of context seems not only incredibly disingenuous, but also fundamentally at odds with the concept of America, which kind of blends fun and free speech to create a conversation that informs and entertains people. So, Milo, what do you think is the media's responsibility with respect to outrage culture?
I think the media has a really huge responsibility to stop the natural social dynamics, for instance, of Twitter, which lend themselves to kind of mob culture, outrage, to the ease with which a retweet can turn into a tsunami. I think the media has a responsibility to pick battles. And so far, the journalists have for the last half decade, because they're lazy, basically. Our profession is full of idiots, talentless, lazy idiots. Because journalists are lazy and they just want an easy write-up, they have for the last half decade gone, oh, outrage was sparked today by such and such on Twitter about such and such. It encourages and emboldens, enables people who get upset for a living, people who live to be offended by something, or people who want to just go out and find something to be upset about that day in service of this apparent higher moral mission of social justice or whatever. But it also, the other really deeply irresponsible thing about it from a journalist's point of view is the extent to which they allow random bubbling up of popular outrage to determine the news agenda. Now, you can be, a Democrat in terms of being a supporter of democracy. You can be a believer in freedom of speech and equality of access to platforms and blah, 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 and still believe that there is a role for a journalist in responsibly curating the news. It was always the case in the print era of journalism that there would be editors who decided what the big story of the day was. And when something really big happened, most editors decided, were in agreement. The front pages would all have the same story on them, right? Now that, we used to, you could buy a newspaper, and if you didn't agree with them, or you thought they were being dishonest, or they were ordering their stories wrongly or whatever, you could switch papers, But we trusted journalists to do this job properly, and by and large, they did it pretty well. But economic pressures and the ever lower quality of graduates going into our profession mean that now things are sort of dictated by who shouts the loudest online, rather than the considered judgment of an experienced editor in a newsroom working out what is going to be on tomorrow's front page. These days, journalists are just looking at what hashtag is trending. That, for me, is a complete dereliction of their duty. It doesn't mean, that on the surface of it, it sounds like that means journalists are, like reflecting what people are thinking and how they're feeling. But we all know There's a reason that we have representative democracy and we don't just do plebiscites for everything, because if we did that, we'd end up with somewhere deranged like California, which says we don't want any taxes, but we want tons of public services, because people don't always, A, vote in their own interests, and B, vote consistently. So it was always the job of journalists in the print era to be judicious, to act as a sort of sensible, calming influence, and to sensibly order the news of the day. That simply doesn't happen anymore. Now, you're much more likely to get a news story via a social platform, in which case all of the incentives of journalists. Economics professors always talk about social incentives as the best way to understand human behavior. Well, if you think about the incentives for a journalist now, rather than seeking to impress a seasoned reporter who is their editor and hoping that their story makes the first couple of pages or even the front page of the newspaper, now journalists are incentivized to do precisely the opposite, to go for the trashiest, the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit, the stuff that's just going to get the quick outrage clicks online. And of course, that has an effect, that has an impact on how we write and what we write, which is why I'm getting out of the game, and I'm doing something else with my life. But the media has a responsibility to put a screeching halt on the direction in which it's been traveling for the last 10 years and go back to calm, dispassionate, reasonable, intelligent reporting. And that probably means firing most newsrooms. And it probably means going to a smaller staff, producing a smaller volume of much higher quality content. And also, just getting rid of the mob rule hysteria that has ruled for the last half decade. I mean, this incoming president, fine, he's not the most popular president ever to take office. But he was given no honeymoon period, as is traditional by the press, to allow him to settle into the job, which is bad for the country, as well as bad for the administration itself. And the level of hysteria and sort of fact-free. I mean, it seems to me like, Russia, for instance, there's no evidence whatsoever. No evidence has come to light of any collusion between Donald Trump and Russia, whatever. But the media does it anyway because it knows it gets people excited and it produces the right emotional response and things. This is partly a product of economics and partly a product of social media dynamics. All of this is wrong, and the media has a huge responsibility in treating hurt feelings or people pretending to have hurt feelings as outrage, masquerading as substantive debate and as reasoned critique. Has a huge responsibility to park it, reverse the truck, and really think carefully about what the purpose of journalism really is. Are we simply going to reflect what people are angriest about today, in which case we are useless and we perform no greater function than the trending hashtag column on Twitter's website? We really add nothing. We add nothing. Or are we going to be calm, dispassionate, intelligent chroniclers of what is actually happening out there in the world? And are we going to hold power to account? Are we going to do those big investigative stories? Are we going to tell the truth about people? This just simply isn't happening. And what Camille Paglia, the great feminist critic, recently said about what the Democrat Party has done to journalism and done to the media. It's going to take decades to unravel. The fact that, journalists, the Woodward and Bernstein tradition is gone. And now what journalists seem to be engaged in the business of doing is these petty, childish crusades and activism, CNN is just like a TV station full of activists now. This is not what journalism was supposed to be. The American media establishment, American media industry is in my view, as a Brit visiting somebody who has a great love for journalism, for the media, for the job that we do, and an understanding of how important it is. It's very sad to me to watch America, supposedly it should be the shining beacon of freedom, truth, hope, and all the rest of it, to be somewhere where journalists have completely given up on what they were always supposed to do. They have given up on trying to tell the truth, given up on trying to hold truth to power, and instead have simply become another branch of left-wing activism, just like Hollywood, just like just like academia. This is not good enough. And the reason that people hate journalists and hate the media and voted for Trump because there were people who voted for Trump because they hate CNN. The reason that's happening is journalists. Nobody did this to journalists. Journalists did it to themselves. They've lost the public trust with good reason, and they need to stop. Take a long, hard look, back it up, and consider what their role in a civilized society really ought to be. Because right now they're not performing any useful function whatsoever.
Right, now obviously with President Trump we do now live in a pretty unprecedented political era. If you had to speculate, what trajectory do you see the media taking in this era? Will they learn from their mistakes, that perhaps it's not the best idea to feed candidates debate questions or to polarize whole swaths of the country with identity politics? Or will they instead continue down the same path and get increasingly frantic, mendacious, and spiteful?
Well, frantic, mendacious, and spiteful is exactly what they are, and it's exactly what they were right the way through the election campaign. And we were all sitting back and we were wondering, what are they going to do now that he's in office? Are they going? And the New York Times admitted, we got this wrong. We didn't understand the country at all. We don't get the country we're reporting on. There were these signs from the media that there might be a little moment of self-reflection, of humility, of a little pause where they thought, you know what? Maybe we don't actually understand the country we're reporting on that well. It cannot be the case that half the country is a basket of deplorables, that half the country are these racist, sexist, bigoted, homophobic, transphobic monsters. Maybe they just see the world differently from us. But what did they do? No, they went the other way. They decided to double down on the fake news narrative, say that anybody who just, described things from a conservative point of view or reported on stories that they didn't want you to hear about was fake news. They decided to double down on the attacks on Trump. They invented a Russia narrative for which there is still no evidence. There is no evidence. And yet it's still wall-to-wall on every major network. And they continue to behave poorly. They continue to lie. They continue to betray their prejudices and biases at every turn. I mean, look at MSNBC with the Georgia special election. They said they were going to give wall-to-wall coverage when they thought the Democrat was going to win. And then when it was clear that the Republican won, suddenly they found some fascinating human interest story. They're just so transparently dishonest. And they haven't learned their lesson. They seem, in fact, to be doubling down on all of the mistakes they made in the election. That it seems to me that whatever mistakes Donald Trump makes, whatever mistakes the president makes in the coming couple of years, it is the media who are going to put him back in the White House at the next election.
Sure. So we're 5 months into the Trump presidency now. What do you think are the successes and shortcomings of the Trump administration so far?
I wanted two things from Trump. I wanted him to kick off the dismantling, the deconstruction of political correctness, and he did that very successfully just by being elected. It was the most colossal shock to the system. It shook the foundations of the establishment and all the different bits of the liberal establishment. So that I'm happy with, and he's kind of done that now. So we're good. We're happy. The next thing I wanted to do is just build the damn wall. What are we waiting for? I mean, I did a video actually on YouTube, was it 6 months ago or something, where I took some guys down and we started building the wall. I was like, I'm just going to give Daddy a head start. And I think that we laid about 9 bricks before we got bored and wrapped the video up. Well, that's 9 bricks more than Trump has laid. So I'm just, we quite like it if Trump, were to see through his signature campaign promise. I don't care too much about endless wrangling over healthcare. Maybe I should. I don't care too much about endless wrangling over other small things. I know consumer confidence is up at the highest level since 2000. There are all kinds of indicators that demonstrate Trump isn't doing as badly as the media claims he's doing. I don't want him in any foreign entanglements. I think America needs a period of peace and calm and self-reflection, and to get strong again internally before you guys go off and fight more foreign wars. I do want him to build the GD wall. I want him to get it started because it's a really important signature policy that he promised. I think if it doesn't happen, his entire presidency is a joke. It must happen. It should happen. And the policy, and it's, of course, it's symbolic. The policies that it suggests and the commitment that reflects on America's behalf to looking after Americans first, I think is really significant and very important. It's encouraging that that illegal border crossings are going down so sharply because of Trump's rhetoric. Good, fantastic, and you get liberal media outlets reporting this like it's a bad thing. I think that the more we see of the kinds of people who are pouring into America, and you guys really don't want, whether we're seeing angel moms on TV or we're seeing the consequences of the drug trafficking down the south of America, the borders with South America and Mexico, or whether it is the consequences of allowing multicultural sort of a multicultural blind eye to growing Islamic fundamentalism, which exerts itself in a variety of ways, not least the Pulse nightclub massacre. They might be gay, but America, they're your gays, and 49 of them are now dead because you allow a mosque to operate in the north of Orlando, which hosts preachers who say things like, quote, the compassionate thing to do is to kill homosexuals. the mosque in, I think it's called Stanford, north of Orlando, hosted a preacher who had previously said that the most compassionate response to homosexuality was to murder them all. I mean, this is happening in America, and they're not the only ones. This guy's dad, is it Sadiq Mateen? He had an arm's length list of associations with terrorists. So, of course, the obvious place for him to show up was at a Hillary Clinton rally. And his son goes and shoots up a gay nightclub. I just encourage America to remember, if the progressive left has encouraged you to think of everything and everyone in terms of special interest groups, consider who you'd rather live next to, a gay couple or Islamists, because you are going to have to start making those kinds of choices over the next 10 years. And for me, I think the messages that Trump is sending about the sorts of people America does want and does not want, and some of the effects of that, like a collapse in illegal border crossings, getting his visa policy through. These countries that harbor terrorists, that grow terrorists, that happen to be majority Muslim, just by accident. I think these are all good things. And I think they should all continue. I just want him to build that wall, and I think he will. I hope so. I think so. And other than that, really, the priority for me is that he continues to speak with the same ferocity and freedom that he did about dear Micah and her lovely and whatever work she had done, or whatever it was she had done. This is the Trump that people know and love, and that's what no one realizes. Because you get liberals who are like. You get liberals who are pearl clutching and pretending to be horrified by this on television, even though they're not really. And you get conservatives who are often very snooty and snobbish and aloof, and kind of it's all about manners and etiquette for them, and you kind of have appropriateness of language, and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe our president said that. But it's just, that's the president people fell in love with. That's Trump. That's who he is. And I noticed that people were talking a lot about whether Trump's language was appropriate for his office. An office, by the way, that literally has had presidents putting cigars inside interns and running drugs and guns in Mexico, as Ann Coulter so memorably tweeted this week. But also, they were saying how inappropriate it was that he would use language like that, but nobody said it wasn't true. Nobody was disputing the veracity of his claims about the dear MSNBC host, because most of what he says is true. Most of what he says is right, and people don't like the language he uses. Well, that he and I are brothers in arms there. So I'm happy so far. I know that people there's a little kind of rump of the Trump movement that is getting a bit disillusioned because they didn't get everything they wanted immediately, and that's fairly childish. I think that the broad contours of history are going to show that electing Trump was definitely the right thing to do, and compared to a Hillary presidency, I mean, we're still clearly on the side of good.
Right. Now I want to turn to another front of the culture war, and that's one with which you're very familiar, college campuses. So there's something really insidious going on that I've noticed, at least as an education reporter. You have deans paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and whole departments staffed to implement equity, which seems to be code for not equality of opportunity, but instead equality of outcome. Meanwhile, capitalism, nationalism, colorblindness, these have become naughty words. So have you seen something similar going on during your college tour, Milo? And if so, what can we do about it?
Well, ritual public humiliation is always my weapon of choice. But for those of you who don't have the amount of money in the bank, or tour buses, or large audiences, I would just encourage you to hold people to their own standards. Where you are told that there's a nice strand of conservative activism popping up at the moment, of young, kind of mischievous, trolley Trump conservatives who don't mind doing some of the stuff that left-wing activists did over the last 30 years. And for the most part, I like watching it happen, because what they're doing is they're using Saul Alinsky's tactics. They're using, the playbook of the left, and demonstrating what life would look like if conservatives were in the opposition. And guess what? Turns out we're much better at everything. We're even protesting. On college campuses, I think the simplest way to effect change is for I mean, basically, you have to hit them where it hurts, which is their pocketbooks. Basically, you have to make it clear to university administrators that if they follow down the path of social justice, if they ostracize conservatives, if they vilify, if they speak ill of normal, reasonable, mainstream, respectable points of view, if they give into social justice at the expense of free speech, that it's going to cost them massively, which means being in touch with alumni networks, which means all kinds of things that you can do. Look at the fallout from Missouri, right? The university went all in on the race baiters, and what happened? They're closing dorms left, right, and center. Alumni donations are down by tens of millions of dollars. I mean, the whole university might close. And the same thing kind of happens elsewhere. There's lots of examples of this. UVA is in a bad way too, quite rightly. The great thing, and the reason I have hope, and many conservatives don't have hope. And you'll sometimes hear, like Dinesh D'Souza will say, colleges are lost. There's no point. Like I still talk there, but they're lost. I think he's wrong. And the reason I'm so much more optimistic than other conservatives is because I really do have faith in the marketplace, not just of ideas, but the marketplace of education. The reason I love American higher education, being so capitalist, so privatized, so obsessed with money, is that ultimately the market's going to prevail. And we see that very clearly. The colleges that give into social justice, when the parents finally get the message about what's going on, when the alumni finally realize what's going on, these places just evaporate or get into so much trouble. And we're going to start to see, I believe, in the next 5 years, a sort of splintering between social justice institutions like DePaul and centers of free speech like the University of Chicago. And if you want to go to university in Chicago, you're going to have a very clear choice. Do you go to a private university that is going to give in to Black Lives Matter, to feminism, social justice warriors, to the hateful, spiteful, divisive, mean, vindictive, ugly, far left activist brand of politics, so beloved of the academic establishment? Or are you going to go somewhere where, yeah, sure, most of the faculty is still left-wing, but the people running that place have made it clear that this is not somewhere you go if you want safe spaces or trigger warnings or whatever. I believe that there's going to be a sort of there's going to be a split. People are going to start doing league tables. Maybe I'll even start it myself. Maybe I'll do that. League tables, like freedom tables, where you can look at what university administrators have said, what has happened around campus rape, wage gap, social justice, all these kind of these flashpoints, right? We're going to start to see how universities behave, and we're going to see people making informed choices about where to send their children on the basis of the behavior of those institutions. That's the market working as intended. It's capitalism. It's wonderful. It's great. We've reached breaking point now. The media's reached a breaking point. It's been run by liberals for too long, and people reacted against it by putting Trump in office. We're reaching breaking point with education too. I think the success of my last tour and what's coming up on the next tour and Berkeley Free Speech Week and all the rest of it, the American higher education establishment should be just as scared of me as the media was of Trump, because I'm coming in force, and I am coming to take their safe spaces away. And those colleges that refuse and double down and insist on social justice, fine, I'll just make them famous. I'll make sure everybody knows exactly what they're getting into when they send their kids there, and I'll make sure everybody that went to those colleges that still gives them money knows what they're up to as well.
Right. Now, Milo, for my final question, I wanted to return back to the point in your career where you first began really obtaining some notoriety. And this is when I first discovered you, all the way back in, I think it was 2014.
Wasn't I?
You were No. Yes, you were a very humble tech journalist.
I was.
Right, but you called attention back then to what seems to be a new political faction springing out of sites like 4chan, Reddit, and movements like Gamergate. And so I believe our friend Joe Bernstein over at BuzzFeed called this new counterculture chanter culture. And so can you explain for our viewers what contribution, if any, this group of meme warriors, this dissident, irreverent youth to which you're referring, had on something so colossal as perhaps the election of President Trump?
Yeah, the answer is laughter. They were fun. And things trickled down out of what's really quite obscure internet culture into the mainstream, into political discourse, into how reporters were speaking. The left was horrified that people dared crack jokes. The right, the right was kind of split in two between people who liked it and people who didn't. There was I think it's fair to say, although he would probably find this disrespectful, but I think it's fair to say Trump trolled himself into office. And I think his supporters trolled the opposition so successfully into looking ludicrous and ridiculous that lots of people stayed home and didn't vote for Hillary, which had the same effect, putting Trump in office. I think that my college tours, as the Trump campaign told me, did a significant amount to keep Hillary voters at home and embolden some people who just thought, let's take a chance on Trump. I think that the mischievous, dissident, trolly faction of young libertarian and conservative internet culture that you and I both love so much had a significant effect in the last election, because there are these places on the internet that most people will never visit and most people have never heard of, like 4chan, which have remarkable effects on wider culture. And things start there, and you might only, and sort of spiral, they balloon out into things that you suddenly then see on CNN, maybe 3 or 4 years later. Pepe the Frog, is used by the left to somehow insinuate that an entire generation of young people have turned into white supremacist Nazis. But to the people on the internet, it's hilarious because they've managed to get CNN to kind of like chase their own tail like a dog, around a nothing burger, around nothing. But it's just remarkable how these extraordinarily obscure things can spiral up out of control and end up on ABC and NBC. I've never seen anything quite like it. People said that Barack Obama won his victories using technology. Well, if that's true, Donald Trump won his victories using people. But those people were emboldened and enabled by the internet. Those people were active on, and it was a triumph of the human spirit of mischief and dissidence and a lack of respect for authority that so many people congregating in these online spaces created a climate of political discourse in which it was possible to sort of say anything and be anything and have fun and prod the right people. It splintered the right into the pearl-clutching, National Review types and the rest of us. And I think it had a vast, vast effect on journalists in particular who were on Twitter, seeing this internet culture spill out of 4chan, spill out of Reddit, and on where they live, which is Twitter. Reporters are on Twitter morning, noon, and night. And seeing it spill out has a huge effect on how journalists reported everything. So, I've never seen anything like it in my life, and I don't think it will happen a second time. I think this was a sort of weird moment where a million different strands came together in perfect harmony for a fraction of a second, and we got President Trump, like against all odds. The most unlikely thing ever to happen in American history, perhaps. President Trump. And for me, the mischievous dissident element, which is so key to understanding why Trump is in the White House, and so obviously beyond the understanding of the media at the moment, it really comes down to laughter. It comes down to them being more fun than the opposition. It comes down to 30 years of language policing and speech codes from the left versus this new emboldened, fun strain of conservatism that was just like, let's have a laugh, like nothing's that serious. And it was a return to kind of like mischievous anti-establishment cultural conservatism that we haven't really seen since Buchanan, and then before that, who knows. But it's down to laughter. The left doesn't let you laugh. The left doesn't want us to laugh. The left doesn't want us to do anything. The left wants to divide us, wants us to be miserable, alone, and dependent. And I don't want to be miserable or alone or dependent. I want to be happy and successful and popular and good looking and all of the other things the left hates. And I think more Americans agreed with me than agreed with, Lena Dunham, let's say. The more Americans see of Lena Dunham and Amy Schumer and Hillary Clinton, I think the more they run into the arms of the right. So, this is why Donald Trump is a fan of Chuck Schumer and of Nancy Pelosi, and so am I, because we need those people demonstrating every day the humorless schoolmarmishness of the progressive left, because the more they clamp down on your right to expression, the more they clamp down on your right to say, do, and be anything, the more that they clamp down on your right to laugh at whatever joke you want, free from the fear of being branded racist, sexist, homophobic, and goodness knows what else. The stronger we get and the better we do. And it's for watching the media, as I said earlier, double down on precisely the tactics that put Trump in the White House in the first place, watching them reach fever pitch hysteria over the last 5 months has convinced me that unless there's a significant change in course, unless there's a significant change in the way that reporters in this country behave, I think Trump is guaranteed a second term.
Right, and it does seem to be the case that the left could perhaps stand to take a lesson in history. If you look at the totalitarian movements of the 20th century, what did they fear? It was laughter. So thank you very much for your time, Milo. Again, I've been speaking with Milo Yiannopoulos, whose book Dangerous comes out on July 4th. Thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you.